There was a very good piece in the Detroit News by a fellow named Nolan Finley over the weekend. And he said the president who pledged to transform America has picked his next target in the country's makeover, and it's the suburbs. Obama, the utopian, hopes to use, and by the way, there's mostly Republicans in the suburbs, not exclusively, but mostly. This is something I keep pointing out. The Democrats use government to attack Republicans or non-Democrats and to help Democrats. And in the Senate and the House, we have Republicans who attack us too. Obama, the utopian, where have you heard that before, hopes to use both the federal treasury and the federal club to coax Americans into neighborhoods planned by bureaucrats to perfectly reflect the nation's diversity. No more rich town, poor town. All towns will be places where everyone lives on the right side of the tracks in blissful harmony without any social barriers to separate them. That's the vision of the affirmatively furthering fair housing rule announced earlier this month. It's a masterwork of social engineering that will allow the federal government to reshape nearly every neighborhood and country to assure it has the correct income, racial, and ethnic balances. On paper, it appears fairly innocuous. It authorizes HUD to send local zoning boards reams of data about racial and economic disparity in their communities to help them proactively overcome historic patterns of segregation and foster inclusive communities for all. We're even talking about neighborhoods that didn't exist 5 years ago, but they have historic patterns of discrimination. Communities will get feedback on their schools, transportation systems, and racial and social economic makeup to help them determine whether they are fully welcoming to poor people and other classes protected by the Fair Housing Act. And once the data is compiled and analyzed, the expectation is that communities will take positive action to improve their numbers. And if they don't, they'll lose their federal housing money. Or worse, they'll face a lawsuit from a federal government emboldened by the recent Supreme Court ruling on disparate impact, which makes it okay for prosecutors to determine discrimination simply by looking at statistics. I think the phrase that the great Anthony Kennedy used, and I say that obviously mockingly, was unconscious discrimination. Suburban communities will be coerced or urbanized by plopping affordable, read low-income housing in middle and upper-income neighborhoods, and to demand that all residential developments, including luxury projects, contain a percentage of low-rent units. They're going to go after the builders. They're going to go after the zoning boards, the planning commissions. They're going to go after the mortgage companies. That's how they're going to do this. The intent here is to make every neighborhood look like America. You know, like the places Obama vacations in, Martha's Vineyard among them. More likely, the rule will make every neighborhood look like Detroit, he writes. The Motor City should have settled the question of whether forced integration works. Its abandonment was accelerated by court-ordered school busing and government efforts to reorder neighborhoods. Housing is one of the more difficult markets to manipulate for social outcomes. Homeowners always have the option of packing up and moving out when the nature of their communities no longer meets their needs. They won't be trapped by government mandates in communities where they don't feel comfortable. It's a nice thought that there can be suburbs where $1 million estates sit next to $800 a month apartments and everybody gets along just fine. The reality is that efforts to coerce economic diversity in housing almost always end up destroying neighborhoods. But I say practice what you preach. Where does Obama live? Where does Obama vacation? Does he live in majority-minority neighborhoods? No. Does he vacation in majority-minority neighborhoods? No. And he never will. And neither will Hillary Clinton. And neither will a whole bunch of you-know-whats on the left. Because social engineering, that's for you and me. Any government that has this kind of power has unlimited power, ladies and gentlemen. If the government has the power to tell us what we can eat, to tell us what we can drive, to tell us what we put in what we drive, if the government has the power to tell us what kind of health care we can have, if the government has the power to keep the borders open against the will of the people, if the government has the power to have these massive databases with all aspects of your personal, financial, and other information on them, then that is a government that is not warranted by your Constitution, period. We are living in a post-constitutional period. I keep saying it, and I mean it. And I mean it. And I'll keep saying it until they either pull me off the air or I drop dead, one or the other.